Mr. Kanji Manchu Desai, let's understand the journey of this man and how he established roots in California and helped further his community to kickstart the hotel industry in America.
Sure. Uh, Kanji Manchu was born in Digas. It is about 20 miles from the Surat city. And he was one of the younger son of Manchu Ram, the farmers in Surat. And he had a few acres of land. And so what happens in Surat in those days, what happened is that either too much rain or too little rain. If it's too much rain, they are unable to pay off or buy. I mean, there was not enough to sell to be able to afford a good living. So they always went into debt. So what was the custom in those days? If you are a younger son, you go to either Bombay, Calcutta, Madras, or East Africa, where most of the Patels since 1860s were going. So somebody gave a little opportunity to Kanji Manchu. So why not we go to Trinidad? So that's we ended up in Trinidad. But unfortunately, in Trinidad, he was selling household merchandise by bicycle to the people of a town called San Fernando.
Hello and welcome to Indian Diaspora Podcast. Today's episode is very special. We'll delve into the proud history of how Patels built their hotel empire in America. We have a renowned author and historian, Mahendra Doshi, with us. Mahendra Doshi ji, welcome to the Indian Diaspora Podcast.
Thank you for helping out my message. Thank you.
Absolutely. So, you have written this excellent book called Surat to San Francisco: How the Patels from Gujarat established their hotel business in California. And you have chronicled the stories, the unsaid stories of great entrepreneurship and adventurers, pioneers from India. What motivated you to write this book?
Well, I was in a phase where I needed to do something in the retirement. So I was going to do, I've done couple who's who among Indians. And so I thought I would do another one, the latest one, so I can include most of the diaspora who have done well in their endeavors. So then one of the Patel hotelier came and says, Mahendra, why don't you do story on us? Because we have reached a stage where people need to know how we become so big. So this is how I started. And one of the problem I came across right away was there was nothing about Patels in our archive. I went to the Berkeley, I went to Stanford, I went to a couple other libraries, couldn't find anything about the Patels. So they didn't discourage me. I thought, oh, I'll do the oral story. So I met few Patels and then led me to the other Patels and then finally led me to the descendants of the founders, three founders. And so it was a long journey. It took me 8 years, but I was able to do it. As a journalist, I want to make sure that I source everything. I just didn't just based on the whatever they told me. I want to make sure that I verify the contents. So I did even go to Surat areas and talk to the people, relatives of those founders as well. And finally, I was able to do the story, and then I wrote over 500 pages. And then I found out that it's too much. So it took me almost a year to edit it to 350 pages.
You've given 8 years of life to produce this excellent book. I've read this book, and the stories of Indians out here is so inspiring. In fact, let's
Mhm.
discuss some of those stories. So, the
Sure.
first person who is the pioneer is Mr. Kanji Manchu Desai, let's understand the journey of this man and how he established roots in California and helped further his community to kickstart the hotel industry in America.
Sure. Uh, Kanji Manchu was born in Digas. It is about 20 miles from the Surat city. And he was one of the younger son of Manchuram, the farmers in Surat. And he had a few acres of land. And so what happens in Surat in those days, what happened is that either too much rain or too little rain. If it's too much rain, they are unable to pay off or buy. I mean, there was not enough to sell to be able to afford a good living. So they always went into debt. So what was the custom in those days? If you are a younger son, you go to either Bombay, Calcutta, Madras, or East Africa, where most of the Patels since 1860s were going. So somebody gave a little opportunity to Kanji Manchu. So why not we go to Trinidad? So that's we ended up in Trinidad. But unfortunately, in Trinidad, he was selling household merchandise by bicycle to the people of a town called San Fernando, and he wasn't making enough money to pay his pay enough to send back money to Surat. So somebody told him, hey, you've been here almost a year, you haven't done much. Why don't you go to America? This is the land of ghee and mud in Gujarati, they call it. He said,
The land of milk and honey.
milk and honey, yes.
Yeah.
So he said, but how do you go to America? He said, well, there are so many ways because America is not allowing legal migration. So you have to find a way to do it. So he somehow managed a business visa. Can you imagine a fourth grade educated got
Mm.
himself a business visa? So somehow he landed in one of the, no, he landed in New York City. He tried to do something, couldn't do it. After a month, somebody told him, go to California where there are a lot of Punjabi farms and you will be able to get a job. So he took a train from New York to Sacramento, and that's how somebody took him to farms and Punjabi farms, and that's where he worked. He was working 10 cents an hour, and there he met Naranji Patel, Nanalal. Nanalal gave him a job, took him in his team, and he worked and worked for a few more years till the World War 1941 started. And one of the lady where he was staying in the hotel, he said, well, I am going to be reporting to internment camp. Can you run my hotel while I come back? So Kanji Manchu was actually very sick, and he couldn't stand up on his feet or bend. So he said, oh yeah, this is better for me, so I'll better take your offer. And this is how 350 down, 75 a month, 52-room SRO, single room occupancy hotel. And that's how the first Patel hotel started. It was called Hotel Ford on Key Street.
Hotel
Uh,
4 on Key
Ford,
Street.
yes. Key Street,
FORD.
in FORD and Key,
Got it.
KEY, Key Street, Key and 6th Street in Sacramento, downtown.
Excellent. And what year was that?
1942, October.
Okay. So the first motel or a single room occupancy SRO was started in 1942. Hotel
Correct,
Ford on Key Street, California.
correct, correct.
All right.
Yeah. And so this Kanji Manchu was a pretty, I would say, outgoing type, and he was always have so many acolytes, who believed in him. So they were all staying in, not all, but few were staying. And so he helped him say, hey, you work here, save a few dollars, and then I'll get you a hotel. And in once he was in Sacramento, there was no real expansion. There is only Nanalal and Dilal got themselves hotel. But once war ended, the Japanese lady came back, repossessed her hotel, and the Kanji Manchu moved to San Francisco or in Mission District. That's where he got his first hotel called Hotel Goldfield on 4th Street. The address is 157 4th Street between Mission and 6th 4th Street. And that's what his first hotel. And once he got this hotel, and he was able to attract a lot of Patels who were nearby, and he all told them that there is nothing better here. The discrimination was rampant. If you are an Indian, chances are you're not going to get any decent job. So everybody he met, he said, hey, if you're a Patel, get a hotel. There's nothing better for you. He used to say in Gujarati, કે અહીંયા તમારા માટે કાંઈ બીજું નહીં મળે, તમે હોટલ જ લ્યો. Yeah. So that by 1946 war had ended and America had decided, hey, the India being such a English speaking country, why not we allow a little migration here? So they passed a law called Loose Seller Act, where 100 Indians a year were allowed. Before that, no Indians were allowed by the law of 1914 and 1924. 1917 and 1924. So people started coming, and meantime, Kanji Manchu's fame has spread in the Surat area. He said, hey, this fourth grade educator has become a big businessman, a hotelier. So everybody who heard about the visa opening, they applied in the U.S. consulate. And within a year, people started moving to San Francisco. They all wrote to Kanji Manchu. He says, oh, we just got a visa. Where do we go? He said, no, come here. I have my hotel and I'll find you a job. And that's how by 1952 had a 30 hotels into the hotel business. And they
Wow.
all in a single room occupancy hotel.
Yeah.
And he actually introduced a novel method of financing. This Patel work in the farms have $1,200 to $1,500, and they needed say $1,800 or $2,000. So you will give them through the help of others handshake loan. You
Yeah.
just here is a $300. You're in arrears. So get your hotel. When you get some money, you pay us. Drab and drip method. Pay when you can. And that's how the Patel hotel expanded. By 1956, there were more than 30 hoteliers.
By
So
1956, more than 30 hoteliers.
hoteliers
Okay.
in
From
Mission District.
got it.
Between
Okay.
Howard and Mission Street, between 2nd and 4th Street, 6th Street.
Okay.
That's what the headquarters of Indians was in those days.
Hmm. So, since the early 40s, when the first hotel was established, to 1950s, you have a proliferation of 30 hotels across California. So that's where it all began. Now, sorry,
Yeah.
carry on. You want to say more?
No, go ahead. It was not across California. It was still in the San Francisco, Sacramento
Yes,
area.
very focused in the Bay Area, San Francisco
Okay.
area. Now there are more adventurers. You mentioned in your book. I get reminded of the World Parliament of Religions, 1893, I believe, that Swami Vivekananda ji attended. But also there were another less known person, a Jain religious scholar who attended. Could you
Yeah.
talk? So, besides the Patels, who moved from East Africa, or moved to East Africa or Trinidad and then to USA, could you also talk about other migrations, like this
Sure.
gentleman or the scholar that I'm talking about that happened,
Sure.
that came to America?
Uh, present day, everybody in from India wants to come to America because America is a land of opportunity. In a later part of the 19th and 20th, 1950, 1850, so 19th century, most of the Gujaratis were not willing to come to America because it took, in those days, travel by ship, it took them more than 6 to 8 weeks, and they were so expensive to travel. So Patel and the Gujarati had a network in East Africa. You go to Kenya, Tanganyika, you go to South Africa. As soon as you land, there's a Patel network to find you a place to live and find a place to work. So most of the Gujaratis not willing to come to America. There were few Patels in Panama and Trinidad, but Gujaratis were not looking at America as a place to live or a place to work and place to save money. So all these guys were going to Africa, but those who had not thought of Africa and they got an opportunity to go to Trinidad or Panama, they went there. But America was still not in their radar. So, however, first Gujaratis who came to America were Parsis. Parsis started coming, you wouldn't believe. They came during the President Lincoln's inauguration. Yeah, there were a couple Parsis there. First Parsi who came to America, it was in 1850. And so if people ask me, when was the first Gujarati came? I said the first Gujaratis were Parsi. Parsis, of course, Gujarati
Yeah.
speaking.
Yeah.
And so most of the Patels were going somewhere, but there were few adventures. Patels somehow come via Panama. They came, but they weren't able to find job. There was so much discrimination everywhere in America. So they will work in the farms, make little money. Wasn't enough for them to stay here, and America didn't allow them to become citizen. So so Gujaratis were say, "Oh, we are not coming here." So there were few adventurous Gujaratis, and there were two of them. First was a Gujarati, Virchand Gandhi. He was a Jain scholar, and he got an opportunity to come along with Vivekanand. But Vivekanand actually sidelined him. However, he was a very good speaker. He spoke, and then after the 1893 conference in Chicago, he stayed here 2 months, preached Jainism, and he wrote a lot of articles in the American magazines. And then he went back, but he died at the age of 28 or 29. So he was there. And other adventures, Gujarati was our Hussain guy, our Verma. He was from
Chagan
Portland.
Verma, I believe, right?
Chagan Verma.
Chagan Verma. Okay.
Chagan Verma. Yes.
Okay.
Chagan, of course, he changed his name. Chagan was from Porbandar. And but he brought up in Delhi, and he was highly intellectual. He was a kind of person who spoke so many languages and was very adventurous. So he went in Japan, made some money, made some enemies, took the money, and he was the first Indian or first Gujarati to land in Hawaii in
Wow.
1910. And he
Okay.
stayed 1907, and he stayed a few years in Hawaii. But then he was being bombarded by the people who wanted his money back or their money back. So he decided to go to Vancouver, landed in Vancouver as Hussein Rahim, changed his name, so he thought he will get away with. But then he saw the Indians being discriminated in Canada, in Vancouver, or Punjabis. So he said, "Hey, I'm going to see what I can do." So he took over the leadership and gave hard time to government of Vancouver and government of Canada. They tried to deport him several times, but he beat them, and he stayed there. and Kongata Maru ship that came,
Yeah.
and he tried to help them to land, but Canadian or Vancouver government wouldn't allow them. So
Hmm.
he raised the fund to feed them, and then he tried to play politics, but the Canadian government wouldn't like it, wouldn't like his politics. So he was a kind of person who Canadian wanted nothing to do with, but he stayed and helped Canadian Indians in Vancouver. He
Hmm.
was one of the other ones,
Hmm.
and there was another Gujarati, Govindji Naranji Patel. Now we hear stories that how great America is, allows, if you come here, you work hard, you make it living. In those days, there were stories I'm talking about early 1900. He said, well, America is a place where you earn and study. So there was an article in one of the magazine, and this Govindji Nanji read about it. He said, well, why not I go to America where I can study and I can also work?
Hmm.
So somehow he managed to get a permission from the British government to. In those days, there was no visa requirement. Yes, there was no visa. He told the British officer that he wants to study in America. I said, okay, you look like student, you speak good English, you
Hmm.
can go. So he traveled by ship. Took him 6 to 8 weeks to land in New York. And then he didn't know what he was going to study, but they told him, hey, if you want to work, go to the Punjabi farms in Sacramento.
Hmm.
So he took a little train. It took a train from New York to Sacramento. Ended in Davis, California. Found a job. He worked, and then registered himself in the horticulture department of University of California, Davis,
Hmm.
where he worked at the same time in the farms and studied. So he was able to work and study. And
Hmm.
but he wasn't able to get his degree. So somebody said, hey, you'll have to go to University of Arizona. So he
Okay.
went to University of Arizona, and he was the first Patel to get a degree in horticulture in I think it was 1911.
First Indian or first
First,
Patel?
first Patels.
First Patel. Okay, so there
First
were other Indians who might have got
Oh yeah,
their
they were
education.
at that time in my research. So there were people in Berkeley.
Okay.
Berkeley at that time was a hotbed of revolution. All the Bengalis,
Hmm.
Das and a couple of famous Bengalis were all studying there. And
Okay.
so this Nanji Govindji, he got his degree, and then he said, well, I'll work a few years, get some more money, and then go back to Surat.
Hmm.
So one of the revolutionary, he said, why don't you register in California, Berkeley, University of California? So he registered, and then he was caught in this revolutionary movement,
Hmm.
and then FBI and Secret Service were always after him. So he got scared and he said, I'm not staying here.
Okay.
I'm So he left, and then he got a pretty good job with the government, Maharaj of Baroda, and
Okay.
but then what he did us a favor. He wrote his biography in Gujarati.
Hmm.
So it's के मारो Americano प्रवास, my visit to America.
Yeah. Hmm.
So
Or my travels in America, I believe, right?
yeah, my
Yes.
travel is in America.
Yeah.
Maro Americano Pravas,
Sure.
yes.
Yeah.
Or my journey to America.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Excellent.
so this was the moment I'm talking about was the Gaddar movement.
Yeah. What
And
is Gadar moment actually? Could you define that?
yes, Gaddar movement was uh, mostly it was Bengalis who were persecuted in India, so they came to study, but their main aim was to uh, spread the message of India's independence.
Hmm.
So while in Berkeley they were kind of participating in Quit India movement.
Hmm.
So the government of the British government, along with the help of the American government, didn't want these revolutionaries in California. So they were after them.
Okay.
But America in those days, they were always accepted these guys. They said, no, you can't deport them. So some of them were trying to be try. American government forced them to be deported, but they were not able to. So that this was the Gadar movement, and
Yes.
Patel had not much of a role in the because at that time Patel population was very negligible.
Okay.
But this guy got caught in that conspiracy
Yeah.
of the Gadars and the U.S. government. So he had to leave. But
Yeah.
I was able to use his book uh, for my description of how many Indians were there. And this guy has told that there were more than 20 to 30 Patels working in between 1910 and 1918 in the
Hmm.
Punjabi farms.
Okay. Hmm.
So very interesting story.
Very interesting. Now, if we just reflect back, right? Uh, so many Indians from outside of India took part in the India's independence movement. Chagan, who went
Verma,
to Canada and he became Hussein Rahim.
Rahim
He,
Hussain. Right?
Rahim Hussein. He actually actively worked for independence of India from Canada.
Correct.
And
Okay.
there's Govindji from US, and of course there
Yeah.
were Bengali intellectuals in the universities in Berkeley.
Oh yeah.
Uh, so
Berkeley
much
was
of
a
uh-huh.
Berkeley was a hotbed of revolution, and they
Yeah.
were printing cyclo-style newspapers. And in those days, even the liberal Americans were helping them raise funds,
Yeah.
support them. So it was good. Their role was a little small roles, and but at least they were part of contributors to the
Yeah.
Indian independence.
This is fascinating history, Mahendraji. Um, Coming back to one more strand, which is Punjabi farmers, Sikh farmers. So the first Parsis, when they came in the 1850s, when did the first farmers from Punjab came to California, and how did they get into agriculture? Do we know that?
Yes, I have done a pretty good research on that. Okay, uh, in uh, in the early 1900s, there was a Queen Victoria's birthday or anniversary in Hong Kong, and most of the Punjabi Sikhs as well as Hindus, Punjabis were in the British Army in those days.
Mhm.
So they went to Hong Kong to celebrate the Queen's birthday,
Mhm.
and somebody told them, "Hey, the Canada is hiring people, and their wages is like dollar a day. So it will be good for you to go over there."
Mm.
And the Canadian Railroad was also advertising to for the migration of uh, other people, so they
Mm.
can work in the railroad, or basically railroad. They were building the railroad.
Mm.
So more than a couple hundred soldiers, Punjabi, they were in those days they would call them Hindus, because if you are Hindu, if you are Muslim or Sikh, you are still a part of Hindus, and they
Mm.
spell Hindu word as not Hindu but Hindoo.
Mm.
So they were all. So these guys landed in Vancouver, and the Vancouver government said, "Okay, if you can come," but then they started coming more and more.
Mm.
And so they said, "No, no, no." And the British government said, "No, no, we don't want these people to come and work here, and there will be anti-British." So Punjabis were kind of discriminated from. So Canada, they went to Washington, and there was a big riot because most of these people thought they were taking our job. So
Hmm.
they pushed them back. And so these Punjabis, they were about 200 to 300 strong. And they couldn't stay, so they spread towards Sacramento. They work in the railroad, they work in the farms, and the Punjabis were also very enterprises. So they thought, hey, if we can work in the farms, we can own the farms too. So in those
Yeah.
days, you can't own it, so you have to lease it. They started
Okay.
leasing the farm. So
Hmm.
by 1904, quite a few Punjabis owned the farms.
Hmm.
And the Patel were beneficial in that sense that they were, as soon as they landed, they were able to work in the farms.
Excellent.
So Punjabis were the first large-scale migration of Indians in America, and the
Hmm.
year was 1904.
Right. And we have stories of, I believe, Mr. Jagdish Thind, who became the first US citizen of
Correct.
Indian origin. Am I right?
Yes, yes, but they tried to take it away, his
Yeah.
citizenship.
Yeah.
And there were more than a few other Indians tried. But I give you one example of this. There was a guy called Kawasji.
Hmm.
He came as a business as on a business visa. In those days, America only allowed two kind of people to come to, not as a migrant or immigrant, but as a student or on a business visa. So
Okay.
this uh, farm Ms. Kawasji came as a businessman, and then he
Okay.
started business in New York area, become a successful business person, and he applied for U.S. citizen. So judge asked him, "What makes you?" Because citizenship was only allowed if you are white or if you are black, but if you are black born here.
Hmm.
So this guy says, "Well, I am Parsi. I'm a Persian blood. I'm a Eurasian blood."
Hmm.
So the government says, you look like a white, so we give you citizenship. So
Hmm.
that's how he became. But then there was a movement to discredit this sort of people, and and the court, American court, and when the High Court, they took away their citizenship. But the
Hmm.
thing went to a couple courts, and he regained his citizenship by 1924 or so.
Okay.
Oh, actually, later part of 1920s.
Yeah. I'm just trying to put myself into their shoes, all of them, the early pioneers, right? It was a constant struggle and uphill battle against which
Oh,
they won, and
oh,
they survived, persevered, and the determination that they had is
absolutely.
so
And
outstanding.
discrimination-wise, the
Yeah.
white majority of white people didn't want any other kind of people in America,
Yeah.
and so they fought like anything. But the
Yeah.
courts were pretty liberal-minded, so some of them were able to stay here.
Thank goodness to the institutions in America,
Yeah.
that the checks and balances, right? That's always made this nation great. Great. Now, let us also understand the legislations. You said 1917, there was the
And
first
1920, yes, in 1924. By
24.
that law,
Hmm.
what was doing that there were Chinese and Japanese. Chinese came in 1850s, and
Okay.
so did the Japanese. So there was a movement here
Hmm.
in America. He said, these foreigners are taking our jobs, so we shouldn't allow, particularly the Asians
Yeah.
and particularly Chinese. There was a huge movement from China to come to America, and they were coming. They were coming by the hundreds.
Yeah.
So they passed the law says only people allowed in America are the Europeans, but none of the Asians. So they were all the Asian countries were barred except Filipinos.
So that's the law of
So
1917.
1917 and
Okay.
1920, yeah.
What was that law
So
called, Mahendraji?
uh, I think it was in those days they didn't call him. I'll have to check that thing. But
Hmm.
those actually uh, laws of 1970s and 1924 they
Got
barred
it.
Asians.
Yeah,
Uh,
I've read about the Chinese Exclusion Act. So I knew a particular, let's say, nationality that was targeted. But um, reading a book, it came to my knowledge that the entire Asia or Asians were also under the purview of such a law, which I was not
yeah,
aware about. Yeah.
except for Japanese, Chinese, and Indians, there were not much. There's no other movement from other
Hmm.
Asian countries, but they barred as a whole, so they wouldn't
Yeah.
allow anyone else. And
Yeah.
that's one reason Kanji Manchu, Nanalal, and Dila they couldn't become resident because
Yeah.
the laws were there.
Right. Now, funnily, a noted Patel gentleman called him the Indian Columbus of America, right? Mr. Kanji.
That's a Kanji Manchu.
Talk to us more about that, the Indian Columbus of America. That sounds interesting.
Okay, okay. Yeah, in the 1950s, when Kanji Manchu left,
Hmm.
uh, but those 30 Patels, they were grateful to him for putting them into the hotel business.
Hmm.
So, so couple of the relatives who came later in the 60s, they heard about Kanji Manchu. He says, so they called him Indian Columbus because
Okay.
he was discovering things for Indians. But I actually didn't like the word Columbus
Yeah.
because Columbus who discovered countries.
Yeah.
And of course, he discovered Haiti and
Yeah.
uh,
And called it India.
yeah. So, I thought Kanji Manchu's biggest contribution is uh, to discover a business for his
Yes.
his clan of Patels.
Yeah.
So,
Even greater. Absolutely.
but Kanji Manchu still, if I talk to a couple of old Patels, you say, yeah, he's our Columbus. I say, of course, he's. So that's why he got himself
Yeah.
a name as a or a title of Columbus of India.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, so far we discussed what happened. Now I want to move to how it happened. So just let's take the story of Kanji Manchu Desai. It's not easy for a fourth grader to become a successful hotelier and his
Mhm.
fame to spread in Trinidad and in East Africa and India. Can we walk through the process of his enterprise, his hard work, the methods if he followed to become successful business owner? I know you briefly talked about this, but I want to give a dedicated chapter to this to the
Of,
how of his journey.
of course. See, Kanji Manchu, as we discussed, he was a fourth grader. Once he got the hotel Ford, uh, it was 32-room hotel.
Hmm.
And in those days, if you have a single room occupancy hotel, there's not much service you provide. You just say 50 cents a day. Here's the room, here's the bathroom, and if you want to stay, you renew again next day and give us other 50 cents. So, what Kanji Manchu found after working in the farms, in California farms, in the sun vacuum, on summer day, the temperature is 110 degrees. And
Hmm.
in those days, in those temperature, you pick up the fruit and you work 10 hours a day for 10 cents or 15 cents an hour. So at the end of the week, you probably make 10 or $15. And so Kanji Manchu found that by renting these 32 rooms, and at the end of the month, doing nothing much work, and I still make $100. And most Kanji Manchu ever made in farm work told me by their relatives is maybe $40 or $50 a month. So now he was making twice as much, and he wasn't working in the 110-degree walking sun. So he said, well, so this is good. So Kanji Manchu was an extrovert. He always made friends. So he had a lot of Muslim friends, he had a lot of Fijian friends, he had all kinds of friends. So once he got the hotel, people visited him, and then he started feeding them khichdi and curry, the Gujarati staple food.
Yes.
And so people will come once a week, eat his khichdi curry, and have a kind of get together sort of soiree, and then Kanji Manchu with his leadership role, he'll preach, and I call it a Patel manifesto. So what he was preaching is that if you are a Patel, lease a hotel. There is nothing better. So this is how he in Sacramento he made 3 Patel hotels, and once he moved to Hotel Goldfield, he started preaching this very vehemently, and he made so many people take a note of it. And they were during that legal visa. There were about 5 Patels who were college educated who came here, thinking that America will give them a bigger job, better job, and make a lot of money. So these 3 Patel, one of them was Danji Vakil, other was Dayabai Ratanji, and third was Bula Vanmadi. See, these people, when they saw what Kanji Manchu doing, they didn't like the work. The clientele of Kanji Manchu was all those people on welfare, people on social security. People were kind of people they wouldn't find job work, not work, residence anywhere. So they were renting the room from Kanji Manchu. So these people says we don't want to. On there, of course, there were people of ill repute were there, winos were there. So these educated people says, I didn't come from Surat to have this kind of job. No, I'm looking for a job in my field. But when Daya Ratanji went to an agency to look for a job, they shut down the agency, says, no, we don't allow brown people to come here. So this Daya Ratanji finally forced to work in the farms, and then he said, I don't know what to do. I have a BSc in botany and I can't find anything. So Kanji Manchu says, my friend, run a hotel. This is your best solution for you. So Daya Ratanji, Danji Vakil, Bulavan Mari all went into the business. They didn't like the work initially, but once the money started coming, they said, hey, there's nothing better than this.
In a way, he was saying, become entrepreneurs, become
Become entrepreneur. And
controllers of your own destiny.
yeah, and a Gujarati tradition is this. Gujarat is, even my family told me that you don't work for somebody, you work for yourself. So when Kanji Manchu become a self-employed entrepreneur, people say, ha, sabas beta, you did the right thing.
Wonderful.
So
And
this was this Patel job in a hotel was an entrepreneurship plus, of course, self-employed. That you don't work for anybody, you are your own boss. So this is all Patel like this thing. Initially they didn't, but then they realized that this is good.
absolutely. And Mahendraji, look at that foresight that one of the um, elders had in the Patel community, and today that flame of entrepreneurship just carries on, and Patels have huge dominance in the hospitality and hotel industry in America. Had it not been there for the Patel manifesto that Kanji Bhai had, it would have been perhaps a very different story, right? So I just want to, reflect on the important role he had, and how history is shaped by leaders like him. It's a fascinating story.
Absolutely. And every Patel conference I go, every Patel meetings I go, I tell them that without Kanji Manchu, you won't be in this business,
Yeah.
because the guy had a vision, had a foresight, and had a heart.
Yeah.
Kanji Manchu unfortunately died very poor. He
Hmm.
was the one of the founders who didn't get benefit of his own work, because see, Kanji Manchu had come here illegal. He had actually come officially as a tourist on a business visa, but he
Mhm.
let the visa lapse. So he became a kind of undocumented alien,
Okay.
and he had actually no right to stay. But
Mhm.
in those days, the enforcement in that part of city where he lived wasn't that great. So he survived all this one, run the business. But what happened that finally somehow he was found out. So the U.S. government decided that he was here for so many years, so they asked him to voluntarily leave.
Hmm.
So actually, he was not deported. He left on his own volition.
Yeah.
So
So did he have to part with all his property here in the US, and
he
that's
didn't
why?
have any property. See,
Okay.
there was an alien act in California where you cannot own, and if you are not a citizen, you can't own anything.
Hmm.
So he was able to lease it. So
Yeah.
he leased it. And in those days, when he was making money, probably making 100, a month, but he was so generous because he had in Surat, he had uh, three children. So
Hmm.
uh, he
Yeah.
was sending money. So he had, and then he was giving these loans to the newcomers. So he had practically no money to his name.
Hmm.
So when they had to send a ticket to London uh, for him,
Yeah.
so he ended up kind of moneyless person. But his two kids were in England, and so he stayed with them. But
Okay.
meantime, he had developed liver problem because of heavy drinking. He
Hmm.
passed away at the age of 60 in
Okay.
Birmingham.
Got it. Yeah. You know,
And
it's hmm. Carry on.
very few people knew about him when he passed away,
Yeah.
because then I realized that this was the founder of a Patel hotel, and he
Hmm.
died
Yeah.
uh, kind of anybody knowing about him. Yeah,
No, absolutely. Mahendraji, such are the stories of a lot of personalities in history. Thomas Jefferson, for example, the U.S. president, he died land rich but cash poor.
yeah,
So perhaps fiscal prudence, immigration, visa, etc. All these are matters that one has to take care of. But also, his on the positive side, his flame, and his legacy lives on in more entrepreneurs that he created. Right. Such are
sure.
the stories that history provides us. Once again, Mahendraji, thank you for bringing these stories to light.
Sure. And I'm
And
glad I did, and
yeah,
I'm glad that people are finally realizing that
yeah,
how the Patel hotel business started. I'm very
absolutely.
happy.
Absolutely. So, everybody, there are such very interesting stories in this book. I've been reading this book and really, really enjoying this. There are more stories, but I will not bring those now. I want to go rather to your story, Mahendraji. We discussed the how of Kanji Bhai. Let's discuss your how. You have given 8 years to this book, right? Talk to us about your journey of when you decided to, write this book and you approached the current generation of Patels here in US or internationally. How did they react to it? What was your methodology of collecting, facts, stories from your sources? And how do you go about compiling a collector's story on this topic?
Sure. As a historian and journalist, two things pretty important:
Yeah.
the sources and who is telling you the story. So when I started the Patel hotel story, there was nothing. I looked for the archive. I went to the University of California, Berkeley, where it has one of the biggest South Asian libraries, but I couldn't find much about Patels.
Hmm.
So I thought, well, let me see if I can do the oral studies. So I found a few Patels who tell me, hey, the Patel business started in 50s and 60s, and so some of them didn't know that Patel started coming in 1920s and 1930s and 1940s.
Hmm.
So once I found out, I started interviewing more and more Patels. Total, I interviewed 160 Patel, and quite a few were the descendants of those 30 Patels I told you about. The first
Hmm.
Patel between 1947 and 1952, and most of them are in San Francisco Bay Area. Few
Hmm.
are in Houston, few are in Louisiana. So I was able to collect their ancestor story, and
Hmm.
my method was very easy. I go to Patel's house with a little tape recorder, sit there I tell them I'll be there for 40 minutes, and then I end up being there for 3 hours. And everyone was very happy that I'm doing their ancestors, their
Yeah.
uncles, their brothers, so their grandfather stories, and
Hmm.
they were very generous in telling me everything. Some of them and had diaries. So there are three Patels who came in 50s. They wrote a little cyclo-style biography for their grandchildren. So and they were in Gujarati. So I was able to get a hold of those stories, and those stories were very good because it described their time, how they came, how they struggled. So it was a great source for my book, and I'm
Hmm.
grateful. And then there were uh, 5 to 6 Patel wives who came in 50s and who were surviving at that time, and I was able to get the first-hand stories of their husbands, who were the second batch of Patel founders.
Hmm.
So, so my source was kind of primary in that sense, and I was able to uh, uh, interview them, get their details, ask the question. Most of the times, I was uh, I was just listening to them, and some of the Patel ladies. Oh, you won't believe them. One of the called Santa Ben is still alive. Is the wife of Dayabai Ratanji. She would tell me all those foxy stories, and she will go uh, 100 words a minute and was able to tell me all the story. Very helpful. In those
Amazing.
days,
Yeah.
the khichdi is a pretty food of Patel, the staple
Yeah.
food. They still eat.
Yeah.
And they said when she came here, they couldn't find mug dal.
Hmm.
So they were able to get a substitute from a Chinese store to make their
Yeah.
khichdis.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting.
Fascinating, Mahendraji, your approach. And I always say this, if we don't tell our stories, who will?
Well,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So,
And a Patel needed to be needed their story to be told. One of the
yeah.
founder's daughter told me, he said, "Hey, my father came with nothing, established
Yeah.
a hotel, and now if you don't tell their stories, they will fade
Yeah.
from our mind." So I'm very
Absolutely.
happy to do that.
Mahendraji, how has been the community's response to your book?
Very good. Patels in the Bay Area, where I uh, told them about the book, so they have a few signing ceremonies for me, and quite a few people showed up. So I'm
Yeah.
grateful, and I have a few Patel descendants, daughters and sons. They are kind of carrying the baton for me, and they're going everywhere, telling about my book.
Excellent.
So, so
And we get
I'm
in
very
Indian diaspora also very happy to further propagate your message across other Patels, possibly in East Africa who might watch this, or in Australia, New Zealand who might watch this, besides obviously USA and Canada. Um, why should somebody in India read this book, right? Of course, there is a huge Patel community in India, Gujarat. Should they read this book as well?
Yes, they should, because it tells their that people from Gujarat went abroad and settled, and they
Yeah,
settle uh, very nicely. They establish an industry which
yeah,
nobody before did. Uh, their story need to be told in that. And I have done my part. I've been to Surat, and I've been to libraries
yeah.
in Gujarat. I have donated my book to the major universities there because I want
Excellent.
them to know their story.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Speaking of universities, are you also working to have your book in, the Harvards, the Yales, and Ivy Leagues here in the United States?
Yes, one of the Patel entrepreneur who is in the hotel and model business came to me and says, I want you to send 100 books to college libraries where there is a South Asian studies department.
Yeah.
So I was able to do that. But one problem I found out, that you just can't send my book to Harvard,
Yes.
saying Harvard libraries. No,
Yeah.
you have to write to them, tell them what is the story about and why should they get my book.
Absolutely. And
So
for those who are listening this podcast, if you want to get involved in, further propagating our stories, please get in touch with Mahendra ji, and we would love to have your work reach out to more readers and learn about our glorious history. Mahendra ji, with this, we will move to some fun section. We'll ask
of course,
some rapid fire questions just to have
sure,
some interesting aspect and angle come out.
sure.
First question: number one reason Patels are so successful in entrepreneurship is.
Yes, Patels are very clannish, not in any bad sense, because clan word is you can decipher differently. However, they are one reason. Kanji Manchu, if you go back there, that he started helping because he said, "Hey, you are my fellow person from Surat, fellow from Gujarat. You need to do this." So they are very helpful.
Hmm.
And Patels, if you see their immigrant stories, if one Patel comes, followed by his brother, followed by his brother-in-law, followed by his cousins, followed by his Langotia friend from his village, and they all want to get into hotel business, and
Hmm.
this Patel will help them.
Yeah.
He said, "Oh, sure." So they will give them. In the old time, they used to have a handshake loan. Now they will provide financial help differently,
Yeah.
but they would.
Yeah. Thank you. Next question: if you were in the 1850s and you had to make your own journey as one of our Patel seniors, which country would you select? East Africa, let's say Kenya, Caribbean, let's say Guyana, or let's say America, California, where you are.
I would, of course, come to America,
The land of milk and honey.
like land of milk and honey, and without doubt, America is was and is and still is a land of opportunity. If you come here, doesn't matter the color of your skin, your heavy accent, but if you work hard, devote your time, and don't give up, you will be successful. That's my few words about somebody who wants to come here and be want to be successful.
Yeah. Next, you were born in Gujarat but grew up in Calcutta, Presidency College. So, what is home? Gujarat or West Bengal?
West Bengal, Calcutta. I until recently, before my book came out, I rarely visited Gujarat because I actually all my relatives, my brothers, sisters, all are or were in Calcutta. So I always visited Kolkata. I'm a kind of Bengalis Gujarati. I don't speak Bengali very much, but my presidency college gave me an opportunity to go abroad, and I'm always grateful to people of Bengal for making me what I am today.
Beautiful. Bengali, Gujarati, intellect plus business skills all together.
Yeah.
Excellent. Next question. If there is a book on history that has shaped your thinking and your life and influenced you deeply, what was that?
There were several books. There were books by Dr. R.C. Majumdar, an historian about the history of India,
Mhm.
that really developed my thinking that why I want to be a historian. But now, if you want a latest book, there is
Mhm.
a book by, it's called Early Indians by Tony Joseph.
Okay.
That book I just came across about a few months ago. It tells us who we Indians are. So, if you read that book, you will find out we have four kinds of blood in our body. If you are an Indian, first the Iranian blood, second African blood, third Dravidian blood, and the fourth Eurasian blood. So we were the victim of all these, not most of them invaders who came to India, stayed there, intermingled. So who are we Indians? We are all Indians are immigrants. That's what we are.
Mm. That's why Vasudeva Kutumbakam, the world
Yes,
is one family, and tolerance runs through our philosophies and our religion.
absolutely correct.
Lovely,
Quite correct.
lovely,
Yes,
excellent.
yes.
Now, next, one Indian American, uh, even contemporary or from history, that the world should know about.
May I repeat? May I
Sure.
ask you to repeat the question?
Yeah, yeah. So just like Jagdish Thin, who was the first Indian American to become a US citizen,
Hmm.
one Indian American, perhaps contemporary, perhaps from now, or from the past, that the world should know about.
Uh, qu- Quite a few.
Hmm.
Quite a few. If you single out one, I liked so many. Not one. I think there's several. So many Silicon Valley entrepreneurs who were born in India. They came. Microsoft guy, Google guy, couple other people, and their life stories are something that we need to follow, because how uh, with their enterprising nature, with by their educated in India, and they were able to still be very successful here. So
Hmm.
there are several. I
Yeah,
I couldn't name one without naming others, but
yeah,
there are quite a few.
yeah.
Quite a few.
In fact, your answer made me think, right from the early Patel pioneers who were entrepreneurs to the current Indian American entrepreneurs or Google CEOs, Sundar Pichai. The story is the same, right? The story is of belief, optimism, seizing the opportunity, and creating something that has not been done before. Which is the American spirit. Um, Finally, Mahendra ji, I want you to close with a message for every people in the diaspora. Why should they read this book? What's your closing message for everyone in the Indian diaspora?
Sure. My book tells the story of three uneducated Patels who came to America, wouldn't want to give up. They they tried very earnestly. They wanted to make it. And my message is that if you work hard, you don't give up, and constantly work for your main aim, you will be successful. And that's how my story. And by and large, we Indians have done reasonably well, most of us. And the only reason you could do it here is because America, being a land of opportunity, and you see some of the things that I did it here, and a couple of my friends who have done it, they couldn't do it anywhere but here.
Hmm.
America, you don't need a rich uncle or a wealthy father to make it here. You can make it on your own. You
Hmm.
just work hard, you have an idea, just try to expand the idea into reality, and you will be successful.
Yeah. And that's
Yeah.
the story of Surat to San Francisco, everybody.
So, yes.
Mahendraji, thank you for coming to our podcast. All our listeners, I hope you enjoyed this episode. This episode was about entrepreneurship and adventure for me. So, very inspiring. Thank you, everyone.
Thank,
Thank you for
thank
joining our
you.
podcast.
Thank you, Rahul. My pleasure.